2022 saw a lot of challenges for coalition governments. In some instances, mayors were ousted. Others faced motions of no confidence but were voted back in. 66 municipalities were left hung at the last year's municipal elections. Now, big metros became the battleground for three political parties as well, ANC, DA, and the EFF. Now, let's look at the year that was and the future of coalition governments in South Africa and speak to independent election analyst Wayne Sussman, who joins us live now. Thank you so much, Wayne, for your time. This year revealed a lot of vulnerabilities as far as coalition agreements are concerned. Watching from the sidelines, how bad would you say things were?
Thank you, Bongiwe. It's great to be with you on SABC, and it's to recap the year of by-elections and election activity and coalitions. Basically, when South Africans woke up in 2016, which is a long time away, 6 years ago, many South Africans woke up living in coalition governments. 6 years later, many more South Africans, even far more than 2016, woke up under coalition governments. And even though those who experienced coalition governments between 2016 and 2021 did not have the best experience of coalition governments, many more South Africans now experience that. And I think the takeaway here is that coalitions are something South Africans have to become accustomed to. It's definitely going to be a feature of our political life, not just on a local government level going forward, but almost certainly on a provincial level after the 2024 elections, and quite possibly the future of a national level. And South African political parties have yet to know how coalition governments should work optimally, what it takes for a successful coalition government. And what we've seen, particularly in our metros, hasn't been a good example to residents who live there. We've experienced infighting, we've experienced instability, and it hasn't been a great year for coalitions.
And would you say the issue is with power sharing, or is there more here?
I think it's a short-term orientation that South Africans need to realize, that political parties need to realize, that in order to get things done, such as sorting out the infrastructure decay, such as sorting out the fact that more and more South Africans, more and more people are moving to the urban areas, that the infrastructure is battling, the infrastructure cannot cope with the influx of people, with the fact that ratepayers expect service delivery. All these things are a challenge going forward. And political parties need to realize that they often need to make tough decisions and not necessarily get what they promise their voters in order to make coalitions work. So let's take, for example, the fact that in a great number of metros, without the EFF's outside support, the DA, Action SA, Freedom Front wouldn't necessarily be able to govern. So how do you continue to convince the EFF to support you from the outside, but also give services and make sure that you're delivering on your campaign promises to the DA, Action SA, and Freedom Front voters? These are some of the coalition challenges and the challenges of cooperation.
So listening to you then, it sounds like there's a lot of talk about wanting support versus making sure that residents do have the required services that they are paying for. So a lot of time is being spent in council sourcing support instead of going to do what you need to do.
Correct. Service delivery should be boring. You and I shouldn't be speaking about it on late December 2022. But too often we're speaking about the theatrics of council. By the way, the business of council used to be boring. Many South Africans didn't pay attention to it. But when we pay attention, who's the speaker today, who might be the speaker tomorrow, who's the mayor today, who was the mayor yesterday, there's a drama around it. Often it's sadly a comedy. And this is what we're accustomed to, rather than focusing on, is the party which was elected by the voters in 2021, or the coalition which has come together. And since the local government elections, should rather be focused on service delivery than the drama of who's in what said possession and what insult was made in council, etc.
And there's this interesting dynamic that is also emerging when one looks at, coalition politics, is the role that is played by these smaller parties, the so-called kingmakers, as they are being touted as. And, I remember speaking to the DA's Helen Ziller about what she wrote, and she was arguing that these smaller parties appear to be having too much power, and there does need to, seem to be agreements that would then be put in place to also make sure that everybody gets as much power as they should, because despite the fact that you would have gotten over 40%, it's a party that probably got 3% that is going to decide how things then unfold. Let's talk about that dynamic of these kingmakers and how likely it's going to be that it's going into the future like that.
Correct. And I think we'll need guidelines going forward with this regard, whether it's the ANC, who's the largest party in large sectors of South Africa, or the DA maybe in Western Cape or some urban areas, or the EFF in particular area. If a party falls under 50%, it will need to form a coalition. And let's say the second largest party in that municipality forms a coalition. I would say that that party does, in most instances, have the rightful claim to the mayoral chain and or the speaker position, which is a very influential position. What is going to be difficult for South Africans, what could become difficult, if we see a repeat scenario of what happened in Johannesburg, where a party with one seat, a party which barely made it into council, regardless of who they don't work with or don't work with, dictates as to whether the ordinary business of the council can take place or not. And there I refer to the party COPE with Colleen Makubele as the speaker. That is a party which didn't really have the faith of the voters in the local government elections. They got 1 out of 238 seats, I think it was, in Johannesburg. A party like that shouldn't be dictating as to whether the council's business takes place. So I think we'd need guidelines that if the largest party to form a coalition doesn't take the mayoral chain, it should go to the second largest party, not a minuscule party. Of course, this is a multi-party democracy, and a small party, if it does help a coalition get over the line, should be able to get some kind of executive position. But I don't think in ordinary circumstances that the smallest party should be dictating how a council or a city gets run.
How much of a reality coalition politics going to be when you look at things at national level for 2024? Because others are already making some of these predictions that we may be heading for a coalition government.
Definitely. I think if we look at particularly urban or provinces where there are large amounts of voters like Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal, let's just remind ourselves that at the ANC conference just a week, 2 weeks ago, the largest delegation was from KwaZulu-Natal, that these provinces might well see coalitions, possibly the Northern Cape, which is our most sparsely populated municipality, if things go south for the Democratic Alliance, also the Western Cape. So we know that on a provincial level, we're going to see more coalitions. And if the trend continues, like we saw in Ditsabotla, in the Lichtenburg area in the northwest, like we saw in the eThekwini by-election towards the end of the year, if the ANC's by-election trend continues towards the 2024 elections, we might well see an unprecedented situation of a coalition on a national level.
And it's going to be very interesting if looking at what is happening in council is anything to go by. Let's speak again soon. Thank you so much for that. That was the independent election analyst Wayne Sussman. Of course, as we are looking at this issue of coalition governments.